The first world I ever built involved mementos. When a person died, their brain would condense into a colorful, shining orb, a memento, which someone else could absorb into their bodies to gain superhuman abilities, like reading minds, having a photographic memory, or implanting false memories in others. The hand-wavium scientific explanation was that it activated certain regions of the brain, expanding the mind's possibilities. I never wrote this story because I spent too much time world building and not enough time writing, a familiar dilemma for many writers. Here, I want to guide you through 3 core principles of fantasy and sci-fi world building you can use as the foundation of your story, so you can start writing sooner rather than later. While there's a lot of value in planning and researching your world in advance, it's easy to wander so far into the depths of world-building waters that you lose sight of the story's shore. These 3 fundamentals, the setting, the distinctive element, and the character conflict, are meant to help you focus your efforts so you don't drown in your quest to see where the ocean ends. As author Maria Devana Headley once put it, so much of the hard part of world building isn't the building at all, but the pruning of the universe. I created this script alongside my co-conspirator at Story Garden Publishing, Jordan Riley Swan. He also writes under the pen name Riley Rookhouse for his high fantasy series. And he's built dozens of elaborate story worlds that have been developed into collaboratively written novels by our team of talented writers. I'll be drawing on his knowledge along with my experiences as a fantasy writer and editor. Hang around till the end for my absolute favorite world-building trick I learned from Jordan. You can develop these 3 world-building fundamentals in any order. We'll go through them from the macro level to micro level with a larger setting, then narrowing to 1 element, then 2 specific characters. But when you write the story itself, the sequence of priority needs to be flipped. The true focus has to be on the characters, because they are the emotional core that makes the world meaningful. It's rare to find a story that doesn't center the human experience or human-like beings, because we are most fascinated by ourselves, and our imagined worlds are a way to explore the inner and outer workings of humanity. When people talk about world building, setting is usually what first comes to mind. We associate worlds with physical places, and oftentimes geography is destiny, meaning that the landscape and environment we live in shape how a society develops, socially, culturally, economically, politically, and technologically. We respond to our environment, taking advantage of its resources and creating dams for water collection, or mining for raw materials. We find workarounds for problems that geography presents, like building bridges, canals, and roads, clearing away trees so we can traverse landscapes. An isolated island civilization might have less need for a military compared to a landlocked nation populated by different factions, and so on. You can answer these 4 questions to develop your setting at a high level. 1. How does the geography influence the culture? N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth trilogy features a world ravaged by earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, apocalyptic seasons of natural disasters. Origines are people who can influence seismic energy, and they're feared by many for this destructive ability. Jemison pays special attention to the interplay between place and power. The Sanzed Empire is located along a fault line, making it prone to seismic activity. There, the ruling class suppresses and controls origins as part of a caste system designed to impose order in a landscape that is unpredictable and unforgiving. Origins are tools of survival to be harnessed only by the elite. Number 2. What's the level of technological advancement? This relates to what tools and machines have been created to advance civilization. Even in a fantasy setting, technology doesn't spring out of nothing. It is a product of the culture that develops it, which is itself a product of geography. You could choose to set the story at the end of an industrial age, or during a time that feels near future compared to our world. The terms industrial and near future both imply different levels of technology. A burgeoning factory age where mass production has only just begun, versus 3 decades from now when everyone has a chip implant instead of a phone. Technological differences will both reflect and be reflected in cultural changes. A Psalm for the Wild built by Becky Chambers is a post-industrial utopia set on a moon called Penga. Several hundred years ago, robots abandoned their factories and disappeared into the wilderness, leaving humans to revert to small agrarian communities that exist in harmony with nature. This takes the form of sustainable farming and traveling tea monks. The remnants of more advanced technology remain, including the wild robots, even as humans carry on their low-tech lives. Number 3. What's the level of magic? Some fantasy stories have no magic at all, while others feature a light sprinkling of the fantastical, or an intricate magic system that requires an index. Science fantasy as a subgenre combines elements of a fantasy setting like magic or unusual creatures with other planets or technology that's advanced beyond our present era. You'll sometimes see stories categorized into hard magic systems and soft magic systems. Hard magic systems are more rules-based, with clear boundaries for how the magic works. One of my favorite magic systems comes from Full Metal Alchemist, where alchemy follows the law of equivalent exchange. To obtain something of equal value must be lost. An alchemist must have the right balance of metals and minerals to transmute the ingredients into a weapon, for instance. Brandon Sanderson is famed for creating hard magic systems, such as allomancy in the Mistborn saga, where the characters can ingest and burn metals that then manifest abilities like enhancing the senses. On his website, Sanderson shares his 3 laws of magic, which he notes are more like guidelines. 1. An author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. In other words, adding new rules or magical fixes to solve problems can feel like an unsatisfying deus ex machina to the reader, even in a soft magic world. Don't go introducing a magical cure-all for the main character's illness at the very end of the story when healing magic has never been mentioned before. 2. Limitations are greater than powers. When you have limitations to the magic, the characters are forced to make tough decisions and innovate to solve problems. 3. Expand what you already have before you add something new. This allows for depth and focus on particular elements, often resulting in more interesting and robust magic systems. Sanderson also has a 0th law. Always err on the side of what is awesome. Write what fascinates you and makes you want to spend countless hours in your world. Sanderson's advice still applies to soft magic systems, where the rules aren't entirely known. Magic is more mysterious and less controllable, a wild force of nature. Both The Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones are often classified as soft magic systems. The Magic in the Starless Sea by Aaron Morgenstern isn't bound by constraints or logic, but rather presents an immersive, unexplainable setting akin to wandering through Wonderland, with doors to other worlds and enchanted books. There's also a distinction between soft sci-fi and hard sci-fi that's defined in a similar fashion, in terms of how much the system is explained. If the author is more interested in the social impact than the technology itself, it's probably soft sci-fi. If the story goes into detail about how the tech could realistically work from a physics or biology perspective, it's probably hard sci-fi. Both approaches have different effects on readers, whether that's an almost spiritual sense of wonder at the unknowable or a detailed design that can be studied like a science. They're equally valid techniques, and some stories even use elements of both types without being on either extreme. Hello Future Me has great videos and books that go into depth on hard and soft magic systems. Identifying your level of magic will help you determine the type of reading experience you're hoping to deliver. 4. What specific places are important at a scene level? While the large-scale setting is important, most of your story is going to take place at the scene level, at a specific location, whether that's indoors or outdoors. Your scene-level setting might be a magic school, a coffee shop, a graveyard, a lighthouse, an abandoned prison, or a haunted forest. That place can add to the story's enchanting ambience. The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune features a magical orphanage on a fictional island, and the main character is a government caseworker who must investigate their operations. The centuries-old brick house is on a cliff overlooking the ocean, adding to the novel's wondrous atmosphere filled with secrets. To examine all 4 setting aspects at a high level, let's look at the novel Black Leopard Red Wolf by Marlon James. This is an African-inspired grim-dark fantasy novel where the larger geography involves a jungle, which exists in contrast to the village. There are 2 subcultures divided by geography, and the characters in each region make assumptions about the people who live in the other region. In terms of technological advancement, the story includes swords, spears, and bows and arrows, along with herbal remedies and stonework. There are supernatural abilities and magical beasts rooted in African mythology. Although the jungle is the primary setting, chaotic and expansive, there are specific scene-level settings, such as the House of the Witch that appears within the jungle and serves as an important plot point. Putting the story in any other setting, such as a densely populated city or an open desert, would drastically change the feeling of this fantasy world. Now that we have our setting, we can imagine how to further differentiate this world through a distinctive element, one aspect that stands out in the reader's mind as unique, or that's explored in depth. Think of world building as an iceberg. The reader only sees the tip of that iceberg, but you, as the author, know so much more below the surface. By having one element in your world that you know everything about, you can show the reader a piece of iceberg above the surface, and they will trust your expertise about the rest of the world. That element could be the military, the currency system, language, or fantastical features like the molting habits of dragons. You could center on the ecology, cuisine, religion, clothing, music, art, or countless other facets. Keeping with the metaphor, you don't want to ram your manuscript into the iceberg by making the story only about this one particular element, at the exclusion of any other aspects. You should develop all parts of your world to some degree, but there are two major advantages to having a distinctive element. If one aspect of your world is fleshed out, it makes everything else feel realistic. A Song of Ice and Fire captures a detailed royalty system in terms of lineage, showing the messiness of real dynastic policy when it comes to illegitimate children, inspired by the War of the Roses. As a reader, I can buy the quote-unquote unrealistic detail about a magical winter that lasts for years and years, because the story is deeply grounded and convincing in terms of its primary focus on dynasty. Providing deep knowledge about one aspect of the story helps readers suspend their disbelief about everything else. A second advantage is that this distinctive element is what will make your story memorable to readers and give your book a unique selling point. For Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, Susanna Clarke meticulously researched the literary traditions of 18th and 19th century novels of manners to imitate the voice and tone. Since that type of imitation is difficult to achieve without in-depth knowledge, the novel's prose makes an impression on readers and literary tastemakers. Here are 2 questions to help you identify your distinctive element. 1. What are you passionate about that you can spend hours researching? 2. How do you make that element fresh and interesting, especially in the context of other books in that genre? I was floored when I first read Arkady Martine's space opera A Memory Called Empire. I thought only someone with intimate historical knowledge could replicate the feeling of a Byzantium-esque empire in a futuristic setting. And in fact, Martine has a PhD in medieval Byzantine history. However, the distinctive element in the novel isn't the conquest culture, but rather the use of poetry as plot device. Just hear how the author talks about it in an interview with NPR. A great deal of the plot of A Memory Called Empire moves through the speaking of, transmission of, and use/reuse of poetic form. There's a poetry contest that prefigures a war, for example, and a protest song which first incites a riot and then is used to calm it down. Poetry is capable of all these things. I am not instilling it with any special quality that it lacks in the world we live in. And I really wanted to use that to think about poetry as an emotional carrier wave for politics, philosophy, ideology. Also, it's a pretty direct lift from Middle Byzantine literary culture. Teixtgalan, like Byzantium, has a literature that centers poetic forms in part because their literature is one which is performed out loud in political settings. Oratorical verse with rhythm and meter is a valued skill set amongst the intelligentsia. Poetry and sci-fi aren't often seen as bedfellows, so this combination makes for a memorable world. Then we have character conflict, the driving force of the story. The character needs to be tied to this world you've built. This can often be accomplished by connecting the character's goal or struggle to the setting or a distinctive element. World building is revealed through the character's interactions, especially the challenges within that world. Take Star Wars for a classic example. Luke Skywalker must master the Force in order to save a princess he learns about from an android. The film starts off on Tatooine, a desert planet in a faraway galaxy where androids are used for farming and knights wield lightsabers. The distinctive element is the magical force that binds the universe together and gives the hero superpowers. We have Luke as our main character, who's driven by the desire for adventure far beyond his mundane moisture farm life. He wants to become a Jedi Knight like his father. Luke's goals stem from the world in which he inhabits. If he wanted to settle down and find a wife to help with the farm, the Force and the androids would feel incidental to the story. World building can exist just for the vibes and set dressing, but it often functions better when it's baked into the story through character. You want somebody who will not only observe the strange world around them, but be forced to interact with it, through epic space battles and lightsaber duels, through communication with the spirits of dead mentors, via a mystical energy that binds all living things. I have 4 questions to help you define your character in the context of this amazing world you've dreamed up for them to explore. 1. Who could be a main character in this world? What world-building element creates conflict for them? You want to choose a character who will naturally encounter your fantastical components, someone who has the most to lose because of their relationship to this world. What's their profession, socioeconomic class? What else stands out about them compared to others in this world? Rin from the Poppy War by R.F. Kuang has everything going against her. As an orphan from the Second Poppy War, she lives with her foster parents, who are opium dealers, and they want to marry her off to an old merchant who will give them an advantage in the trade. But Rin wants an entirely different life for herself. Making covert deals with her tutor, she studies to pass the notoriously difficult Kudju, a national test that determines entry to the Senegard Imperial Military Academy. All these character conflicts stem from the story world. 2. What does the protagonist want? How is that goal or desire specific to the world? We all have hopes and fears, whether that's to open a coffee shop after a lifetime of bloody battles, or to simply survive another day. These goals are shaped by what's available to us or what is dwindling. A society built around the cost of living can drive us to seek more ways to make money. The endangerment of species makes us strive to preserve animals and their habitats before they die out. Agnieszka, the protagonist of Uprooted by Naomi Novik, faces a conflict unique to the novel's setting. She lives in a village where each decade a wizard named the Dragon kidnaps one girl as payment for guarding the village against the magical wood that threatens their livelihoods. She's chosen for her latent magical abilities, and she wants to learn magic on her own terms, specifically so she can protect her loved ones from the wood. Number 3. How does the distinctive element play into that want? How could the element impact this character in a significant way? Your distinctive element might not be the primary focus of your plot, especially in the case of background elements like currency or language. Still, it can color the dynamics of your world in crucial ways, such as influencing how other characters view the protagonist, or how freely they can move about society. Let's revisit A Song of Ice and Fire with the importance of bloodlines in a feudal system. For Jon Snow, as one of the point-of-view characters, the fact that he's born a bastard is a huge deal. It deeply matters in the world of A Game of Thrones in a way it doesn't in modern Western society. The fact that his father has never claimed him as his son impacts who he is and what he desires. Jon Snow wants to be an honorable man, which might stem from the fact that being a bastard is considered a dishonorable quality. That pressure to be honorable, to be accepted, to fit society's professed values is even more important to him because of his birth. 4. What does a character need to learn? What do they change about their world, or how does the world building change them? Maybe your protagonist is seeking to bring back magic in a magicless world, or they ascend to the throne, having become more jaded from the backstabbing it took to get there. Most stories don't end in easy triumph. The lessons learned aren't always positive ones. When I was reading Jonathan Lethem's Gun with Occasional Music, a sci-fi noir, I wasn't expecting a cheery ending. Conrad Metcalf, the private detective protagonist, does solve his murder mystery, but it's a hollow victory. The world around him has succumbed to further degradation, with society at large being addicted to government-mandated drugs that leave everyone with hazy memories. It's a world where people are left frozen in time for years when their social karma score falls too low. Conrad finds himself yearning to escape the present through drugs and other forms of deliberate self-sabotage. His arc is captured in a scene of rare vulnerability when he's with a woman he genuinely wants to be with. The thing I wanted wasn't lost in the past at all, and it never had been. It was lost in the future, a self I should have been, but wasn't. a thread I'd let go of in myself, thinking I could live without it, not seeing what it meant. These questions are interrelated, but they're important for weaving together your main character's journey with the world around them. The story always comes first, as my friend and author Lyle Enright told me. He also shared insights into how setting and character are deeply intertwined. Ideally, the characters in the setting are rising together, and the kind of story you want to tell is by itself making decisions for you about the world and what needs to be included. My world building for my fantasy novels took an entirely different and more constrained direction when I really committed to putting the characters first, and designing a world that thematically echoed and supported the kinds of stories I wanted to tell in it. I think Black Leopard Red Wolf is a great example of this. The African setting isn't just a cool idea that serves as a container for the story, it's kind of the whole point of the story. The jungle setting means something, wildness, chaos, in relation to the characters and their arcs. The world might be conceived of first, in a way that suggests the stories and the characters, but it must ultimately be built in response to the characters, and to the kind of story the author really wants to tell. The themes, the values. Okay, now for Jordan's magic trick. Need to show something important? Want to explain an aspect of the world without exposition? Break something. Every fantasy sci-fi world has ways things normally operate. The anti-grav meter always stays at a certain number. The gods never interfere in human affairs. But what if the anti-grav meter goes haywire for mysterious reasons and the ship starts falling? What if a trickster god crashes a wedding between two humans because he's in love with the bride-to-be? If you show the reader something breaking, and the bad things that happen in a world where it normally works fine, they will absorb how it's supposed to work without feeling like it's an info dump or exposition. This rule breaking needs to have a negative consequence, resulting in a problem that requires the characters to react. Imagine a world that's like 1920s America, with prohibition and jazz, but there are dragons and dragon riders. That's the setting of Jordan and Casey Norton's book, The Stone Dragon and the Moonshine Molly, where dragons cover their normally vulnerable bodies in metals, creating coats with copper or iron and everything in between. The way the reader first learns of this world-building tidbit, though, is when the process goes wrong. Dragons only molt every 3 years. Our hero's dragon starts losing scales a year too early. He's forced to land and take care of his defenseless dragon while he waits at an illegal speakeasy, run by a beautiful barkeep. The reader learns what's normal in this world by seeing what a broken version of it looks like. So let stuff go wrong. Create scenes where the conflict revolves around a world-building element going off the rails. Feel free to download all the story questions from this video using the Google Doc link in the description below. You can answer them to create a new world or build on one you've already started. I've also posted an example video of Jordan and I going through this exercise ourselves and trying not to strangle each other on the Story Garden YouTube channel. From here, you can go straight into writing, or you can continue building out the details of your world. I recommend keeping a world-building Bible for continuity that's organized into different categories so you can easily reference your own knowledge. There are lots of great free world-building templates online, along with specialized software you can buy, like World Anvil or Campfire. Although I personally enjoy Microsoft OneNote, I know other writers who swear by Notion. This is by no means a comprehensive guide to world building, and there's no one right way to do it. This exercise is simply one framework among many that you can use as a starting point for your imagination. My biggest piece of advice? Write, don't just world build. The world will reshape as you write. We live in a living world, so don't be afraid to let your world live. What are your favorite worlds? It could be a book, movie, video game, or one of your own creations. Tell me why you love it in the comments. Whatever you do, keep writing.